Together. Just wanted to thank all of you for coming out today. My name is Karisch. I'm the chief here from the Rio Grande Valley sector. Want to welcome, of course, members of my command staff that are here today. Some very distinguished guests, including Senator Cruz, and also do have the Director of Marine Operations out here, Mr. Cabrera. They're going to be speaking shortly, as well as Ms. Ana Bulnes from the Honduran Consulate's office here. But before I start talking about border safety and the reason that we're out here, I really want to give a round of applause to the men and women who do this every day. Because you had an opportunity to go out there today and not only see it from the side of the migrant who's coming over in the conditions they face, but also the rescue operations that my men and women do day in and day out. You heard the supervisor from Borstar who was talking about their specialized unit of what they do. But this plays out rescues of migrants, rescues of U.S. citizens, rescue of citizens in this country play out daily from Brownsville, Texas to San Diego. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of them for what they do. So a round of applause, please. So we are here today is to talk about border safety. This is an initiative that we launch every year, specifically in the summer, is to talk about the dangers of this environment. At the end of the day, it's not our decision as to whether or not that person decides whether he's going to sneak across that border. That's their decision. But we can come together is to try to put out information to where if we can keep them out of a river, if we can keep them out of a trunk of a vehicle, out of the back of a tractor trailer or a train to where it's going to save their life, that's what we need to do. We also need to showcase the capabilities of what our agents do every year in saving lives. Here in RGV alone, this fiscal year, many times that I've read a report from my men and women that do something that in my opinion is heroic. We all abhor death. We don't want to see any deaths on the border, but we also recognize that they do happen. But to give you a specific example of our life-saving abilities, a couple of weeks ago, a 6-month-old child with her mother coming across a very poorly inflated raft. Child goes under the water, stops breathing. I thank the Lord that we had agents close by on a boat unit who were able to respond, take the child out of the water, apply CPR, and basically is get that child responsive again to be able to take them to a hospital. Like I said, that is what happens out here every day. But we also have a responsibility, whether it's the federal government, whether it's the state and local authorities, whether it's different governments from different countries, in making sure that we educate people as to what the environment is here on the border, because it is no joke. Every year, thousands of migrants succumb to the harsh border environment. You started to see what it was like after being out here for about an hour. Increased breathing, the sweating, the need for water, and that's that you're on an established road. What happens if you're off in a brush out here somewhere? You become disoriented. They leave you behind, especially when you don't have cell phone coverage. All of these things we plan for every year, but we're much better off if we inform the people that are traveling to the United States or across Mexico or from Central America in getting the message out. Please don't put yourself in a different or a dangerous situation. Whether you're an adult, whether you're part of a family unit, whether you're a child, those are the very real dangers of crossing this border. And that's why we want to do these events. We want to promote safety. We want to promote health. We want to make sure that you stay, that you see your relatives once again, rather than putting yourself in a danger. So welcome. Lot of information that we will cover with you. Be glad is to answer questions after we speak. But this is not an effort, once again, that's done solely by the Border Patrol. If you look at it, we work very closely with state and local agencies in the state of Texas. I've worked with state and local agencies in various locations. We rely tremendously on Air and Marine. The helicopter that you saw coming in for the rescue was actually from Air and Marine, which is a component office of CBP. So it's working together, it's bringing in resources, is ultimately to save lives. I was told by a wise man once years ago that simply crossing a border illegally should not equate to a death sentence. And that's what we do today. That's what we do every day. It's about saving lives. It's about being out here and performing rescues. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ralph Cabrera from Air and Marine, who has a few words for you. Ralph?
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, all. Senator Cruz, real pleasure. First of all, my hat's off to all of you walking that trail. You guys were real troopers in doing so. My name is Ralph Cabrera. I'm the Director of Air Marine Operations for the McAllen Air Marine Branch. We use our aeronautical and maritime capabilities to ensure that we protect America's borders and safeguard her interests. My role here in McAllen is to ensure that the Chief has the aeronautical and maritime capabilities to ensure that he can get to some of these rescues that you witnessed today, specifically the aviation piece that you saw. One of the things that we incorporated is all agents are at least at first responder trained to administer first aid. We also have EMTs on board to make sure that when we get those rescue calls from Border Patrol agents on the ground, that Air and Marine Operations can assist those efforts as best as possible. As you witnessed today, it's not uncommon for a group to get cut off or sit underneath a tree. And if you had the time to look up into the sky, you'll see how difficult it was to even see the sky. Can you imagine looking down and seeing the challenges from looking down from a helicopter? As the Chief said, we had a rescue here recently involving a child. And as he put it, quote unquote, thank God the child was crying, because those agents on the ground, those U.S. Border Patrol agents on the ground, were able to get to him in a timely manner. Air Marine Operations is dedicated to ensuring that we position ourselves to support and work with our CBP components. That includes U.S. Border Patrol and Office of Field Operations. We're committed to that mission, and we're a flexible force that we can bring to these type of operations and change our posture from enforcement to a rescue posture at any given time. With that said, I'll hand it over to Tricamex, Ana Buñas. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, Chief, Senador Cruz, colegas, cónsules de Tricamex, medios de comunicación. Para nosotros, más que una tragedia y más que una emergencia, es un dolor muy grande poder estar enfrente de las familias, de las personas que han perdido su vida en el intento por una vida mejor. Todos hemos sido testigos de un simulacro en defensa de la vida que es un derecho que todos tenemos, la vida que es el regalo más preciado que tenemos del Dios Todopoderoso. Y ese derecho a la vida lo han firmado los países suscriptores de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Y esa asistencia para prevalecer la vida y la asistencia médica y humanitaria que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos a través de su equipo especializado de patrulla fronteriza les da, no hay manera como agradecerlo. La semana pasada mirábamos por televisión cómo devolvieron la vida a un joven hondureño que estaba casi muerto, rescatado del agua en Eagle Pass. ¿Cuántos han muerto recientemente en este sector? También muy recientemente visité a una mujer que venía embarazada 9 meses y llegó al hospital y dio a luz su bebé sin vida. No arriesgar la vida, piden nuestros gobiernos a nuestros compatriotas, ni la de sus hijos. Ustedes, medios de comunicación, son los más indicados para poder informar a la población. Llegan hasta el rincón más grande, hasta la montaña más alta, para poder brindar la información de cuáles son los peligros tan grandes que nuestra población sufre en el intento por una vida mejor. Gracias.
And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Senator Cruz, who will address the media.
Thank you, Chief. Let me first of all start by thanking all of the good men and women of Border Patrol and ICE and CBP who risk their lives. Y'all have an incredibly difficult job. It's an incredibly important job, and an awful lot of times, it's a thankless job. And I want you to know, on behalf of 28 million Texans, we're saying thank you. We appreciate your standing up for this country. We are seeing an absolute humanitarian crisis on the border. This is unconscionable, what is happening. The last month, in the month of May, over 144,000 people were apprehended in 1 month, in a single month. This is a crisis. And unfortunately, this is a man-made crisis. The responsibility for this crisis lies directly on the United States Congress, on loopholes that Congress has put into law that are encouraging far too many people to make this arduous journey. Today, a group of reporters walked 1 mile in the blazing sun, with water, with medical assistance if we needed it. Now imagine doing that if you were a 4-year-old child. Imagine doing that if you were a woman 8 months pregnant. Our policies, the loopholes that Congress has put in place, is encouraging people to risk their lives. And even more tragically, it's putting children in harm's way. Earlier today, I visited the Central Processing Center here in the Valley, visited the McAllen headquarters. One of the more disturbing figures that I heard from the chief is in 2014, not too many years ago, of the adult men crossing illegally into this country, roughly 1% had a child with them. Today, roughly 50% of the adult men crossing into the Rio Grande sector have a child with them. The reason for that, the fault of that, is the U.S. Congress, because we have told the traffickers, the human traffickers, we've told the drug traffickers, if you bring a child, that child is essentially a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is an incentive from the United States Congress. Go and find a small child and take that arduous journey. Risk that child's life. And I'll tell you, far too many of those children face physical abuse, they face sexual abuse, they face neglect. And a growing problem we're seeing is fraudulent family units. Groups that present as a family unit, that tell the Border Patrol they're one happy family. There was recently a pilot program done in the Rio Grande Valley using rapid DNA to test family units that said they were family units. It found roughly 30% of those family units were fraudulent. In other words, the adults weren't related to the kids. We're hearing more and more reports of horrific things like children being rented to those crossing illegally. You know, this is a political environment where a lot of politicians like to talk about their enormous compassion, their enormous virtue. Let me tell you, nobody who is compassionate, nobody who is virtuous, nobody who gives a damn about human beings would want even a single day to perpetuate these loopholes and put more children in harm's way. We ought to be angry. We ought to be angry at politicians that wash their hands of this problem. You know, every time I come down to the Valley, every time I come down to the border, I try to visit with Border Patrol agents, I try to visit with law enforcement, local leaders. What I'm hearing in South Texas and all along the border is this is a crisis that is overwhelming our ability to deal with it. It's overwhelming our infrastructure. It's overwhelming our healthcare system. It's overwhelming just here in the Rio Grande Valley. Chief told me that on average, 1 woman a day, they're taken to the hospital to deliver a baby. On average, 1 a day. Imagine being 8, 9 months pregnant, making that journey. I visited with too many South Texas ranchers and farmers that have found the bodies of people abandoned, children, pregnant women abandoned to die. It is time to end this crisis, and the only way we'll end this crisis is for Congress to stop the political posturing and solve the problem, close the loopholes, so that children are not subject to exploitation as they are right now. With that, we're happy to take questions.
Senator, what did you see at the central processing facility? There's been a lot of talk about the conditions there, that the conditions are bad. What did you see there?
Well, I've been to the central processing facility before. I visited it first in 2014 when it was first constructed. And by the way, I'll say, for all the political rhetoric about cages, that central processing facility was built in 2014 under President Obama. I toured it before it opened, and it was built because we saw then a flood of unaccompanied children coming in. That flood has gotten worse. And what we saw in that facility, what we saw in the McAllen station, is facilities that are meant, I think with the McAllen station, it's 300-400 people it's meant to process. It had 1,100 people in it. It's beyond the capacity for Border Patrol. These Border Patrol agents, let me tell you something amazing. Border Patrol agents are spending 60% of their resources caring for people here illegally. Changing diapers, caring for children. Now you have to do that. You've got kids in crisis. But you know what? That means these men and women are not able to be out here on the border keeping us safe. It is a symptom of the problem. And, I watched last week the Democratic debates where you saw Democratic presidential contender, one after the other, saying, well, they just empty the cages. That was their favorite rhetoric. What do you do with 144,000 people with little children? None of these Democratic contenders are saying that you can't exactly throw children out in the street. It is not humane to continue policies that put more and more children at risk, that subject them to these conditions. And we shouldn't just accept empty talking points. We should demand real solutions so that we're not incentivizing children being put in harm's way.
Senator Cruz?
Yeah.
You're talking about Congress needing to close loopholes. What exactly?
Like in the instructions earlier, we need to keep the questioning to the Border Safety Initiative and the things you guys saw today as far as border security operations. So if you guys could, for now, with the chiefs up here, let's stick to that line of questioning.
Okay, in regards to what you saw today, what do you think that you could take back to Congress that will help make a difference, or at least put a dent?
The most important piece to stopping this humanitarian crisis is ending the practice of catch and release. Catch and release is a practice that is effectively mandated by Congress. It's also mandated by a court decision called the Flores decision, which is being exploited by the traffickers to say if you bring a child, you'll be forced to be released. We need to end that so that we don't have catch and release. And let me point out to everyone here, we don't have to ask theoretically, can we solve this problem? We know we can solve it, and we've seen it. We've seen it in very recent history. In the first half of 2017, we saw the rates of illegal crossings drop nearly 70%. It was a staggering drop in illegal traffic across the border. And I remember being down here early in 2017, meeting with Border Patrol agents and asking them, say, look, the new president had just been elected. We hadn't built a wall. We hadn't hired new agents. It had been so quick that there was very little time for much to have changed. So I would ask Border Patrol agents, all right, what has happened to see illegal crossings drop 70%? And what I heard over and over again, they said the only thing that has changed is that the cartels and traffickers believe now the administration will enforce the law. That if you're apprehended, you'll be detained and you'll be returned home. And it's simply the fact that they believe the law would be enforced, they stopped coming. So what went wrong? Well, what went wrong is because of the congressional loopholes, because of the Flores decision, people were apprehended and then they were released. They're given a court date sometime in the future. Far too many of them never show up. And inevitably what they do is they call home. They talk to their friends and family and say, hey, you know what? Same thing is happening. If you get here, you get released and you get to stay forever. And that's what causes people to come. So if we want to solve this problem, we don't have to ask theoretically how to solve it. We've seen how to solve it. The way to solve it is enforce the laws. And that means ending catch and release and not encouraging illegal immigration. We know that works because we've seen it work, but too many in Congress are unwilling to make the decisions to implement it.
Chief, a lot of talk about, this being a humanitarian crisis. People are sick. People inside Ursula are sick, and maybe they got there sick or maybe they got sick there. But what do you need, either with this money you're getting from Congress, what do you need on the ground here to make sure that people don't get sick or that they get care more quickly so that they don't get sick and go to the hospital?
Right. Well, I will tell you, on average, my agents do about 30 hospital runs per day going into McAllen. So I think anything that we can collectively bring to that table is to keep people healthy. But there are a lot of people that are traveling to the United States right now that are already ill and infirm. Many times we won't know about it. They're not showing any signs of it. But I will show you just how dedicated we are to it. We have one Border Patrol station right now that we've dedicated as an infirmary for quarantine because of all of the illnesses that we've seen. I've asked the governments of Central American countries is to work with Mexico to at least do vaccinations on their southern borders to actually improve this. We are seeing every infirmity that you can name, from mumps to TB to scabies, you name it, our agents are seeing it. But every day we deal with it. We have 3 stages of medical screening that happen right now. Initially in the field when they're first encountered by Border Patrol agents, when they actually make it to our facilities, where either doctors or nurse practitioners do it, and then after, when they're getting ready to be released, there is actually another screening process that occurs. In the meantime, if anybody complains about having a fever, about feeling sick, we are actually transporting to the hospital. I also would like to talk to you about one of the earlier comments that you made mention in regards to the facilities. I think there are a lot of people spreading some very disingenuous comments about that because first of all, recognize is our facilities are processing stations. They're not long-term detention facilities, but we're mothers, we're fathers. We do our best is to take care of anyone that we have in our custody, meaning that we try to provide for them, feed them. My bill right now at the CPC is about $85,000 per month in just maintaining that operationally. My food bill for this sector is about $1.2 million per month of what we're actually providing for on the feeding realm. So I don't think a lot of people truly recognize what we're doing on that front is to care for people. We do have contracts in place is for sponsors to come in and help us watch and care for unaccompanied children. But during the hours of darkness, it's the men and women who are in a green, a blue uniform that are actually holding a child, that are actually changing a diaper, that are actually feeding them. So I think that we should not lose sight of that when we start to point fingers, because at the end of the day, these men and women are all law enforcement officers, but they're still stepping up above and beyond what it says in their position description is to help other people out.
Chief, do we have a specific number of deaths so far this fiscal year?
I don't have the exact specific number, but you witnessed last week we had 12 deaths in this area. All very tragic, very unfortunate that they happen. Nobody wants to see death occur on the border. But imagine if you're crossing that river in a raft that doesn't have enough air, there's too much weight on it, what could potentially happen? You saw the pictures of the mother and father there who drowned in Brownsville. Just west of here in Andelzuas the other day, mothers who left their children out here in the desert area. Nobody wants to see this. But once again, part of this border safety initiative is to also educate them. Please don't do this. There is a way for you to come into the country, and that is through a port of entry. Don't put your hands or your life in the hands of a smuggler who does not care about you. He is just interested in making money. He will leave you out in the desert to die. So ultimately, we all have to try to do our best to educate them.
Karisch,
Yeah.
¿lo puede hacer en español un poco?
Un poquito. ¿Tiene usted una pregunta?
Adelante, no, yo creo que un resumen breve.
Sí, nosotros solo estamos hablando de los riesgos aquí de cruzar la frontera y todos los retos que tenemos nosotros. Abajo de todo es la responsabilidad también de adultos que tienen niños que no deben cruzar en una área como este o por el río. Hay otros medios de entrar al país, pero nosotros todos también tenemos que pensar que hay consecuencias para las acciones de nosotros. I had a question over here.
Yeah, what's the recent numbers? Senator Cruz mentioned 50% of adult males
Yeah.
have a child. What
Yeah.
are the recent numbers on fake families? And also the DNA testing, is that coming back to the Valley?
Well, we've done a pilot test with Homeland Security Investigations. I absolutely want to see it come back. But once again, this is something that they'll have to roll out through the country. I think there's tremendous benefit in it because there are a lot of people. As a matter of fact, when we actually did the rapid DNA, you'd be surprised at the number of families who actually came up and said, this is not my child. So we've had over 1,200 interviews here in this sector alone. We've discovered a number of fraudulent family units that we're seeking prosecutions on because once again, they're exploiting our immigration laws by knowing is that we're not going to be able to hold on to them for a period of time and wanting to is to explore a loophole in the laws. Yes.
Let me amplify two things. Number one of the most disturbing things I heard today meeting with Border Patrol is because of the congressional loopholes and because of Flores, they've been forced to release groups that are presenting as family units and subsequently have discovered that the adults have had criminal sexual convictions, were pedophiles. Now, if you focus for a minute on the combination of incentivizing people to have fraudulent family units, to take a child that is not theirs, and you combine that with a legal system that says if you have a child, you get let go, we are putting children in a position to be horribly abused. That's wrong. That is immoral. And let me say, secondly, there was a question earlier about health conditions. One of the things I hear consistently in South Texas and across the state is concerns about the health conditions, concerns about people coming in with flu symptoms, with other communicable diseases. And I will say that that is a growing problem, and it's a problem Congress is exacerbating. You know, we just had a border supplemental that passed $4.6 billion in additional funds. I'm glad those resources are going to CBP and ICE to help respond to this crisis. But one of the things that congressional Democrats are pushing for is strict caps on the beds that ICE has available. Now, the chief mentioned CBP is not long-term detention. It's meant to be processing. And when Congress caps the number of beds, what you're saying is we're not going to give you a bed, a place to care for someone who comes over. As a consequence, they've got adults in the McAllen station that have been there 40 days when they should be being processed in just a day or two. And one of the real consequences of that, when you have 1,100 people packed into a facility that was built to process 300 people, you end up with people all but stacked up on each other. And when it comes to communicable diseases, when you have people crammed in spaces that are smaller than were meant for them, one of the things the chief talked about is he said, look, in this crowd, if someone in the back there has a fever, is sick, and we can't see in the back because there's so many people crowded in there. That's how you end up with the spread of disease. That's how tragically you end up with people's lives being imperiled. So it is not humane to cap the bed space at ICE. Instead, you ought to have people in humane detention, and you ought to expedite asylum proceedings so that you can have legal proceedings, and those people who do not meet the legal standards for asylum should be returned to their homes as quickly as possible.
Chief,
Let's try to gear this as much as possible. I know that there's a lot of questions in regard, but are there any specific questions of Border Safety Initiative of what we're trying to accomplish here? And I'll give you an opportunity to ask your question as well.
With all that's happened in the last year, how has the mission of the Border Patrol changed?
Other than the fact is that we're investing a lot more time in the humanitarian area on issues. I mean, if you look back at 2014, we faced the same issue. It's just in grander scale. If you look at the numbers of where we're at now compared to 2014, we're well above that. Here in Rio Grande Valley sector alone, we've taken into custody over 266,000 people. We were at about 162 for the entire fiscal year last year. So you've already seen an uptick. Our projections is that we're going to continue is to climb. So it's just dealing with overwhelming numbers of people that we're encountering right now and not knowing where we're going to place them. Because if there are caps on bed space, we have no place to send them. Family residential centers are tied up. You have limited amount of space with Health and Human Services, also to place the unaccompanied alien children. So those are truly challenges that we've got to start looking at as a country.
Chief, you talk about the illnesses
Yep.
and the sicknesses increasing. No one's talking about how that affects the agents. Has it at all?
Oh, absolutely.
How are they doing?
Yeah, I can tell you this, during the last iteration, because right now we've got about 125 agents that are being detailed in from other parts of the countries to help us with processing. Not only, and I actually told those guys, first of all, thank our agents here in RGV who've been doing this for about the last 4.5 years. But wear your respirators because there are so many germs and illnesses, and I'm very concerned about the agent taking that home to their families. So definitely something that we've got to be concerned at. We also, and I don't want people to simply look at this as being a Central American country. We apprehend people from all over the world. This fiscal year alone, we've apprehended people from 60 different countries, including China, Pakistan, Iran, Egypt, you name it, I can name them. Okay, with that also a lot of people from African countries. With that comes the concern of other threats that we've seen in the past. So we as a country not only have to prepare for border security, it's also about seeing some illnesses that can easily be transmitted across the border. So always at the top of our minds and our concerns are those very real threats. But not a day goes by that we don't stress to the agents is please wear respirators, get your checkups, because we definitely also don't want it to impact and affect our workforce.
Jefe,
Sir.
a ver si me puede
Sí.
responder en español.
Okay.
En números duros sobre cuántas personas han sido detenidas en esta área, muertos y también, por ejemplo, el acuerdo entre Estados Unidos y México. Usted desde aquí, desde este punto, ¿cómo ve el trabajo que está haciendo México para detener la oleada de migrantes?
Okay. Voy a empezar primero y a veces mi español está más o menos, pero 266,000 gente han sido arrestados en esta área aquí en el Rio Grande Valley. Nuestra relación con el gobierno de México siempre ha estado muy buena. Yo en 2013 trabajé en una iniciativa para traer la Policía Federal y la Patrulla Fronteriza juntos para hacer las patrullajes coordinadas. Esto hemos tenido por mucho tiempo. Ahorita estamos viendo que México sí quieren trabajar con nosotros tocante el rescate de los inmigrantes que están llegando aquí de Centroamérica. Nosotros hemos visto que se han bajado los números un poquito, pero tenemos que ver también más de 30 días para ver que sí hemos tenido suceso con esto o si solo es, como se dice, un anomaly que tenemos.
To follow up on that,
Yep.
you guys assisted from Mexico, you're
Yep.
getting assistance from other troops coming down. Are the numbers changing at all? Are the conditions changing at all here in the valley?
Well, we had a slight dip in traffic, but once again, I've cautioned everyone, too early to tell, because remember, in this initiative that Mexico launched, will not have taken into account the people who are already in the country. So they are sending a number of their resources to their southern border, but at least for the next 30 days should be a good indicator as to whether or not those efforts are really going to pay off. After that point, if we see that significant drop, then we know that they're going to have more of an active part in this, as is Guatemala and Honduras. We had both governments here last week who have pledged their cooperation, especially on the family fraud that's coming out of their countries.
What's the latest on the numbers of troops that we have here in the valley?
As far as military, I would probably say it's in a range of somewhere between 300 to 500. That number fluctuates. I can tell you that the National Guard, and I was just having this discussion with Senator Cruz, has helped us with logistical efforts, engineering efforts of clearing brush, roads, of helping us repair infrastructure. I can tell you that they've helped us with air support. They have freed up agents from camera rooms to be able to go back to the border. So that's the kind of assistance that I think we need from not only the Department of Defense, from Big Army, but also from the rest of DHS. Sí.
Me faltó el número, dos preguntas. El número de personas que han fallecido en esta región y la segunda, ¿cómo se prepara la patrulla fronteriza para casos trágicos? ¿Cómo responden y cómo afectan a sus elementos encontrarse ante la muerte de un migrante?
Sí, no tengo los números de las muertes totales, pero aquí en esta área yo sí te puedo decir que en el sector tuvimos 12 muertes a la semana pasada. Okay. La otra información sí le podemos dar. Y usted ahorita vio how shall I say, the method que nosotros preparamos con los agentes. Agentes que tienen, ¿cómo se dice?, especialidades en el entrenamiento, en cómo ellos están haciendo el trabajo. Trabajando muy cerca con Air and Marine, que fue la aeronave, el helicóptero que vino aquí a rescatar. Estos son cosas que nosotros practicamos todos los días. Tenemos nosotros EMTs, como usted dio a escuchar, también paramedics. Tenemos muchos agentes que tienen mucho entrenamiento en las cosas de salvar vidas.
Y en la parte emocional, ¿cómo enfrentan eso?
Pues eso es la cosa más difícil, porque uno puede pensarlo. Si uno encuentra a un menor que está fallecido, esto siempre va a estar con usted. Yo siempre le digo, cuando yo fui un oficial de policía muchos años atrás, la muerte de un infante o de un menor siempre te va a afectar mucho más que cualquier otra persona. Okay?
Right now y'all are dealing with the humanitarian mission. Does this mean that more narcotics and people with criminal histories are entering more easy?
Absolutely, because when you have 60% of your workforce dedicated to humanitarian, and I haven't really even addressed the rescue period, because now we're getting to the rescue months where we'll actually be sending out more agents, is to do that. So out of that 60-40 split, that means I only have 40% of the workforce is to dedicate to the border security. With that, you've got hard drugs, you've got marijuana that still continue to flow. You've got criminal aliens. Year to date, 258 MS-13 gang members, 96 18th Street gang members. Not a day goes by that I don't see a report for someone that we've taken into custody that has an active warrant or arrest warrant for murder, for sexual assault, for some other crime here in the United States. So that's the reality of what we faced and why I have not collapsed those checkpoints, because there are still a lot of bad people and bad things that are coming into this country.
And Chief, cocaine is up,
Yeah.
heroin is up, meth is up, fentanyl
fentanyl.
is up,
Yeah.
and if we don't get serious about solving it, those problems are only going to get worse.
And though I can tell you that marijuana seizures are down, my men and women so far this year have seized over 91,000 pounds.
And do you think it's down perhaps because more are getting through?
It could be any number of things. If you look at a lot of states who have legalized the recreational, the medical, there are any number of given reasons as to why that's down. But there could also be that factor as well. We don't intercept everything that we detect, or sometimes we're not going to detect everything we see. We're having to base that on information that we get from other sources.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we're going to have today.
Yep.
Thank you guys for coming out.
Una última, last one.
Bueno, voy a tratar de ser breve. Yo vengo de México, hago artículos para la Secretaría Nacional de Prensa. Tengo una observación y una pregunta muy breve. Hay una estrategia en esta iniciativa de seguridad que estén contemplado en una manera de inteligencia de mercadotecnia, algo así, que vaya con el objetivo de que la gente cambie su ideal de cruzar. O sea, lo digo porque como lo comentaba el senador, la gente no está comprendiendo los riesgos, porque quiere decir que el mensaje no les está llegando. Entonces, si el mensaje les sigue sin llegar, esto que ya se está desbordando, se va a seguir desbordando más. Como ejemplo le pongo, hace poquito tiempo escribí un artículo y le cambié en lugar del Valle de Texas, le puse el título El Valle de la Muerte. Entonces mucha gente empezó a escribir de por qué le llamaba el Valle de la Muerte. Entonces me di cuenta que cuando la gente comprende el riesgo que va a tener, o sea, se le cambia la forma de que se vende la idea para la gente vaya comprendiendo, o un ejemplo de que antes le llamabas el sueño americano, ahora llámale el falso sueño americano porque ya no es, porque te vas a morir. Y para terminar, como la gente le llama internacionalmente, porque me ha tocado cubrir otros países, le llaman la crisis de migrantes, pero en realidad cuando ahorita nos hacen dar este tour, estamos viendo que la crisis pues es de oficiales, porque los oficiales tienen que desplazarse más, tienen que hacer más esfuerzo, y para vender la idea no nada más fuera, sino aquí al pueblo americano, que en realidad la crisis es de oficiales, los que están en riesgo son los oficiales. Está bien hacer gente que viene para acá, pero como se les está dando trato de víctimas. Entonces la pregunta es, ¿hay algo que se esté considerando para tratar de disminuir mentalmente la intención de venir al país?
Sí, por supuesto. Este iniciativo ya tiene desde 1998, que ya tenemos una campana. Ustedes me van a tener que ayudar. ¿Cómo se dice en español Public Service Announcement?
Servicios públicos.
Ok.
Anuncio de servicio público.
Un anuncio de servicio público. Desde este tiempo hemos mandado información a los gobiernos en Centroamérica y también en México para poner estos anuncios para el público, sean de radio, son en la televisión, hasta imágenes gráficas, porque esto va a ser el único modo que la gente sí van a entender que sí hay un riesgo de cruzar la frontera. Y la otra cosa que voy a decir, le voy a decir en inglés porque me hace más fácil para explicarlo. But there is no such thing as a false American dream. There's still an American dream. The American dream means that...
La vía legal sí, pero la vía ilegal me
no, pero uno se tiene que cruzar al país de... you need to cross the border legally. Cuando yo me viajo a México o a lugares en Centroamérica, yo lo hago con la ley, no contra la ley. Y eso es la cosa que nosotros sí estamos tratando de educar a la gente, que hay un modo de entrar al país y esto no es el modo. Pero ellos también tienen que tener la responsabilidad de padres y de adultos que no se van a poner a sus hijos y a menores en una situación así.
Gracias.
Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Send it to me. No,
No, thank you. You're actually going to do the air tour right now.
you know what? I'll be like that to you.
No, John Moore. Big John.